Father, thank you for the many blessings you've bestowed on our community. As we gather here in public service to our town and its citizens, we ask for your divine guidance and wisdom to help us govern effectively, to do what serves the greater good and best interest of our citizens, and to be good stewards and guardians of this beautiful place we get to call home. In your name, we humbly ask these things. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Let's say the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, and please be seated. So we begin our meeting with item number 2, which is the adoption of the agenda. I understand there are going to be a couple of changes tonight, so I would entertain from the council any changes proposed to the agenda.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to change off of the consent agenda and move items D and item E to the either new finish or unfinished business, whichever you prefer.
I think they're probably new business, they're budget amendments, so let's move them and make it item D and E on the new business, okay?
I appreciate it. That's the only changes.
Thank you.
All
And
right.
are there changes, modifications?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Like to add, at the end of the consent agenda, after current F, G, the amended golf course lease. If everyone got the email today with the comments from the attorney and from our town manager, where the golf course lease cannot be renewed for 5 years, it's only 3. I'd like to add that to consent agenda.
Okay.
I understand Dale is okay with it,
Okay,
so.
very good.
Then also, under new business A and B,
Yes,
those ought to be on consent agenda. One of them is language from the state, and the other one is the town, giving the town exception for the July 3rd fireworks. So,
okay. Are there any objections to that? No. Okay, well, we'll move that. That's very good. So we're swapping off
so
there.
all we got are 3 items left on new business, C, D, and E.
Okay, all right.
And then we got H and I under consent now.
Yeah. All right, so we have those proposed changes to the agenda. Any more? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
I'll make that motion.
All right, motion by Commissioner Cameron. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Weber. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Well, let's go ahead then and proceed through the agenda. The next item on the agenda is actually my item, Mayor's Communications, and I have quite a few this evening. I'll try to move through them pretty quickly. I guess I got the job of kind of making announcements here, primarily relating to events that have recently happened or are upcoming in the community. So I'll go ahead. The first thing I'd like to report on is a meeting that was just recently held on Friday, this past Friday, and it was a meeting to discuss the potential for opening a YMCA in our community. This is something that had come up almost 10 years ago to that day, and we had a contingent, as I understand it, come out here and meet with various community leaders and assess the feasibility at that time of opening a YMCA. One of the principal people behind that from the community was Russ Pitts. And the outcome of that, to make the longer story short, was that the CEO of this YMCA in our region, a local region here, told Russ that unfortunately he felt and his board felt that we were about 10 years premature. It was at a time when we didn't have the school was not here yet. We didn't have the Mayheck facility back then. I don't even think we had the grocery store, though we may have. So there were a number of things that were not in the community that existed now. And anyway, he made the mistake of telling Russ that to come back and see him in 10 years, and little did he know that Russ would be the only person to put that on his Outlook calendar. And about 2 weeks ago, as Russ opened his computer, there it was, the note, and he called the fella that told him that, the CEO. His name is Cam Corder. Could you believe that? Yep.
Middle name wasn't Ree, was it?
Cameron Corder, goes to Cam Corder. Anyway, called him up and said, hey, by the way, 10 years is up. We'd like you to come back. Oh, well, lo and behold, the guy was still there, and invited him back, and he came back and visited with us by himself last Friday. That's how that got there. Anyway, there was a contingent of, I don't know, 12 or 14 folks from around the community. We'd call them community leaders, though I think everybody could be a leader in the community. But there are folks that would have kind of a stake in the game of impressing the YMCA as to why they should come to the community. They included folks from our chamber, actually was the coordinator of the meeting, Laura Doster. Russ helped get folks organized in there. The town was represented, the Chimney Rock Village, the Academy, Hickory Nut Gorge Outreach, Ingalls, Rumbling Ball Resorts, our new Blue Ridge Health Services people, the TDA, and a fella that our town manager, Shannon, helped bring to the table, a fellow by the name of Greg Walker, who actually is involved with the YMCA up in Hendersonville and has been involved in this kind of thing for many, many years. And Shannon talked to him about it, and he's offered to be kind of an advisor, a consultant to us as we go forward. So he came down for the meeting. Anyway, we all met, I almost hesitate to say this, at the Lake Lure Classical Academy, which in the gymatorium, which does not have a CO, but we were simply on tour at that time. We stopped by to see the gym, and while we were there, we had a little discussion and kind of presented what we felt were reasons why the YMCA should consider coming to Lake Lure. We think it would be a wonderful addition to our community. We showed him that the site we had proposed before, which was a piece of property on the intersection of Island Creek and 9, was still vacant. We pointed that out to him, and still owned by the town. And we I think, put our very best foot forward to the point where Cam encouraged us to go to the next step, which is to say to put together an even more persuasive presentation and to bring it to Shelby, where the YMCA is headquartered and where the board members are located, and to make the pitch in front of their full board. And so that's really the next step, and that's kind of the direction, I guess, Shannon, we're headed in. We just need to fine-tune, maybe refine what we presented. But we feel like we have an extremely persuasive case. It would be a very unique model for the YMCA, that's for sure. It wouldn't, it was obvious it's not going to be like anything else they have, probably in the state. Because we're a resort community and we offered a number of different partnerships with different entities that included the school, the Hickory Nut Gorge Outreach. They're a big purveyor of helping economically challenged communities with their programs. And so we have all these lake resort type amenities that we felt like could be offered up at times for use by the Y, which they don't have in other locations. We just thought there's these unique opportunities that don't exist elsewhere, which overcome our limited demographics for membership. And so we think we got a pretty good shot at that, and we're going to pursue that. The other thing that kind of popped up, I've reported on this before. I'll just kind of go over it quickly once again because it's gotten traction and it's moving forward, and that's our Lake Lure Rowing Club. This is kind of came to us by a couple who showed up not so long ago at a Lake Advisory Board meeting and asked for permission to row their shell on Lake Lure. And of course, the Lake Advisory Committee said, sure, we would support something like that. It's a good recreational use of our lake, and we already have rowing teams out there. And so that kind of proceeded from there, and from there they also advanced the notion of forming a club that would be the Lake Lure Rowing Club. I'm not sure if that's the exact term, but it would have Lake Lure and it'd be a rowing club. and they would compete. This couple competes at the national and at the world level. In fact, the woman of the couple is a world champion in I think it's a 4-person women's scull, and so they would like to form a club here under the name Lake Lure. They'd like it to be branded to the town, which we think would reflect very well on us and our lake. So they're proceeding down that path to recruit some members. They've already bought another scull, which is on a trailer that we've given them permission to park over near the town's boathouse and dock here in the main basin. And you'll see it out there. You can't miss it. I think it's lime green. But that's a temporary placeholder for what we hope somewhere down the road would be a permanent Lake Lure Rowing Club boat barn and headquarters. And so we've already gotten folks like Jonathan Hinkle, who himself was a collegiate rower, to sort of pitch in a volunteer way and conceptually look at what such a barn might look like in that location or in some other location. And so he's working along with them. They intend to start organizing, as the club gets going, some seminars, training seminars that would bring people to the community for economic development, particularly in the off-season. We think that's good. Eventually, they would like to come to us someday about the possibility of having one or more regattas, rowing competitions out there on our lake with their masters level rowers. And so we think there's a number of residents who already have rowing sculls that would want to perhaps join that club locally. And so we think it's just a win-win situation. And you'll see them out there now. If you get up early, you got to be out there on the lake before 9 o'clock because they're done about that time. So that's another thing to report. There's a kind of a first time, a little bit of a unique event that's going to be held towards the end of this month on April the 27th at the Flowering Bridge. Laura Craigie and the folks from the Flowering Bridge are all getting this organized, and it's really interesting. It's called Ring in Spring in Lake Lure. You know, it goes under the theme of beginning the season. You know, each year the annual season, and so each year we try to make the season start a little bit earlier and end a little bit later. And so April 27th is sort of a kickoff event for this. And so from 11 till noon or so, there'll be a number of activities out there on the Flowering Bridge. We're inviting the public, everyone from the community to show up. The Lake Lure Classical Academy is going to be participating in this event. They're going to bring students who will perform, in a sense. They'll read poetry. They will sing as a chorus out there, probably a sing-along kind of a thing. I will be I guess, a welcoming and opening remarks person for the event on behalf of the town. And Laura tells me that there'll be refreshments served. And so we hope everyone here on the council and here in the community can turn out. I think it'll be a great way to kick off the season, the spring season, and we'll all get to see the Flowering Bridge. And also at this will be the dedication of the new Flowering Bridge educational kiosk. You see it out there, new structure. Another great event coming up, one that I particularly am excited about, is the first annual Classic Boat and Car Show, which is coming up on May the 10th and 11th. That's Mother's Day weekend, and it's being sponsored by the Blue Ridge chapter of the National Antique and Classic Boat Society, as well as the Great Smoky Mountain Region and Little Detroit chapter of the Antique Automobile Club of America. So two big national organizations are coming together to help us host our first annual Classic Boat Show and Car Show. It'll take place down at the beach area, and you've all seen the pier that we've put in there is there primarily to serve that boat show, and so that'll become a place where The classic boats are on display. People, the public can go out there during the show on the pier and see the boats. And we're going to kick the thing off on Friday afternoon with a boat parade from 3 to about 4:30 or so, depending on how long it takes them to get around the route. And we're hoping people along the lakeside will turn out and, cheer on the boats, come out and see that, make a nice kind of a celebration. And we are hoping the LLLOA gets involved in that and promotes that amongst all the lakefront property owners. And we think it's going to be a wonderful event. I estimated attendance at least 1,500. I suspect we can have a lot more, and that's based on the interest we've been getting from the social media posting we've been doing. It could be quite a bit more, and so we'll see how that goes with traffic and parking. We'll try to get ahead of that. Lake Lure Tours and the Lake Lure Inn are actually the hosts for it. A lot of the people coming from out of town with their boats and antique cars will be staying there at the inn. They're offering them, I think, some kind of a special rate or package. And then, of course, Lake Lure Tours and operating the beach concession, they'll be out there, and they've helped set up for it. But in addition to that, they'll be partnering along with the local chamber, Hickory Nut Gorge Chamber, and of course the town of Lake Lure will also be helping out and make sure that's a successful event. So hope everybody turns out then on the Mother's Day weekend. This year we're going to try to elevate, I guess, the way in which we've handled the Memorial Day ceremony. And it again will be, this year, it'll be Monday, May 27th. It'll be at the Memorial Kiosk that's over in the parking lot between the inn and the Arcade Center. And it goes on, that's a third day of the Lake Lure Arts and Crafts Festival. And so it always goes on that time of year. And so it'll start about 9 o'clock on that Monday morning, and it will be wrapped up sometime well before 10 o'clock. It's a brief ceremony. We're going to be inviting Ken Potter back as a bagpiper. He always kind of leads the thing. And I guess, Laura, we're out soliciting folks to participate in the ceremony, some veterans, and hopefully the school might come. That's a day off, so I don't know. But
Ed Dittmer is helping with the planning.
Okay.
And so he's going to be working with us and Lake Lure Tours and helping to plan that ceremony.
Okay,
And we have support from Lake Lure Inn as well.
good. Yeah, Lake Lure Inn is supporting on that, and I think they've offered to provide some beverages or refreshments or something there. Another event that's coming up for the first time that we're kind of excited about, it's an add-on event to the annual Olympiad. This is going to be a separate event of the Olympiad, and it's called the Lure of the Lake Open Water Swim Event. And this is going to take place now. That part of the Olympiad will now come to this side of the lake. You know, most of the Olympiads is conducted over on the other side of the lake at the resort. This swim is going to leave and return and finish at the beach. And so this is going to take place on June the 8th, probably from about 10 o'clock in the morning. There'll be actually two races. One is going to be 1.5 miles, and the other one is 3 miles. And it's being handled by or organized by what's called Set of Events Carolina Swim Series. It's an organized swimming event organization that puts these on in different locations throughout the state, so the Carolinas. And so the town is kind of partnering with the Lake Lure Olympiad Committee to put on this event. So we'll have our events people, Laura and others, involved in it. And the net proceeds will benefit Hickory Nut Gorge Outreach and the local first responders. So if whatever net proceeds there are from this, we'll share those with those organizations. Finally, or almost finally, I want to report on the assisted living facility. I know most of you are involved, at least interested in it. I know I am.
Looking rooms.
Yeah, look around. So I got mine.
You could be part of the YMCA.
Well, yeah. I'm not sure the Y would go with that. OMCA, yeah. It's a branch of it, yeah, senior branch. Okay, so those of you should know this by now. It's located over off of Buffalo Creek Road. It's near the resort, on the way into the resort, across the road from Valley Market there, on some vacant property. Where that is and where it has been for way too long, a couple of years, is in trying to resolve water supply issues, which now appear to be resolved. So as best I can tell, they are resolved. There is a money issue that is associated with that is also apparently being resolved, and it's being resolved by a grant that's being issued or will be issued by the North Carolina Department of Commerce called a Building Reuse Grant. Even though that we're not reusing a building, it also covers new construction for medical facilities, and so this would qualify the Rutherford County, and that particular piece of property, believe it or not, is in the county, not in the town. The county has agreed to match 5% matching share of the value of that grant, which is estimated to be about $270,000. So that grant will, looks like it'll pay for the cost of whatever these additional well and water treatment improvements are, and so the assisted living people, it's called Affinity Living Group from Hickory. I speak to them often, and they're thrilled that the local community was able to do this and help them. And so they're anxious to move ahead. It'll be a 31,000 square foot facility. There'll be 62 assisted living, that's the middle level care beds. It really is, we think, phase one of a broader campus approach with other levels of care, both more intense and also independent living. It'll bring 55 jobs to our area, which is great. 27 of those jobs will have salaries in excess of $34,000 a year, which was an economic break point for the grant. The construction time, they estimate, is 12 to 15 months from groundbreaking, and we're hoping groundbreaking will occur soon. So I don't know when, but soon. And so then my final comment would be I say nice job, those of you who see around town some of the spring sprucing up being done by the town staff. I think it's really, our town's really looking nice, and I thank Melody and her crew for the great work they're doing, particularly here around Town Hall. So with that, I apologize for the lengthy amount of time I've taken up, but hopefully it's all good. So thank you. All right, so let's move on. Shannon, to the town manager's communications.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I probably don't say it enough, but our department heads work hard for the community. They're talented, and we have weekly meetings that we talk about the projects, and we often see them team in these meetings and work together and find ways to get things done. So they're doing a great job. Joked with David Airwood. He was out for about a week. He came back today, and we were able to convert 2 or 3 of his project to 100%. And we thought, well, maybe David needs to take another week off if it has that kind of effect. And he was all for it, yeah. So good job, David. So with that having been said, the first thing I wanted to get a little report on was from Dean, and it has to do with the Parks and Rec work plan. We now have transitioned an employee from community development over to Parks, Recreation, and Lake. And so we have finally wrapped up the work plan that we promised we would help create in conjunction with the Parks and Rec Board. So Dean, if you could talk to us just a little bit about the Parks and Rec plan and your new employee.
Do they have a copy of this?
No, they don't.
Basically, since Garrett's come over, we had went to, well, prior to him coming over, we'd met with Kathleen Osten and Vital Clarity to kind of give guidance of have a meeting with Parks and Rec Board and get guidance of kind of what they wanted to see accomplished, mainly in year one, but through a 3-year or through a 5-year period, just to kind of give us, where do you want to see your new department going since you've got staff? And I can get a copy of this sheet to everybody. I didn't realize you didn't have one. But it just breaks down year one, some projects and stuff that they want to have done through year 5. And do you want me to go over any of it, or this is stuff that we can give to you and let you see what's going on?
Yeah.
But we felt like it was a very beneficial meeting. I believe after the meeting was over with, I did see something change in a lot of the board members' eyes and stuff. They actually got a vision of what could happen within the next year, 2 years, 3 years out, and I felt a sense of community in it.
And a sense of partnership with staff.
Partnership,
I
yes.
think that was a good goal to reach. Okay, thanks. Dean, David, I think we want to talk just a little bit about the geotubes and small generator repairs, if you've got just a minute, and our water system interconnect that we're working on.
The geotubes that we've been working on are on the ground. We've got most of the plumbing done. Don hooked up his polymer pump and stuff today. We're waiting on the pump trucks to get the level in the tank, you know what I'm talking about, down to where we can actually tap into the tank. Once we make that tap and finish up a little bit of plumbing, we should be pumping it into those tubes and saving a ton of money every month instead of paying the pump trucks. So that's basically where we're at on that. The little generator, I'm sure we're gonna get deeper into this later, but we have tore into it. We have got the oil pump out of it. The lower bearing was bad. Charlie Merrick has been helping a lot with that. He has located an identical oil pump like was in it to do the replacement and a place to redo that bearing. So until we get further into what we're gonna talk about later on, we're kind of at a standstill till we see where the board wants to go from here. But we have tore into it and went as far as we said we were gonna go.
And I think for the board and the audience, David, I think all the work that's been done to date has been on the wet side or below the floor.
Yes.
The part of the generator that actually has contact with the water, right? And what we're going to
Correct.
talk about tonight later on is the generator above the floor,
Yes.
which
The
is actually all the
generator
electronic
itself
components that produces
money.
electricity. Yeah, okay. And then the water system, I know you guys have been working on the interconnect with.
Yeah, I've met with Withers Ravenel. They came down, they've looked at maps and stuff we've had. They've been on site, out and looked at our water system and different things, and they've got all of their paperwork together, and they're working on it now. I don't know where they're at as far as the end result, but I do know they're working on it, and as quick as they get their stuff together.
And so why are we doing the interconnect?
Well, basically Firefly Cove, a lot of people probably don't know, but it is running on one well. If that one well goes down, you're out of water. And so if we can make this interconnect between it and the Chimney Rock system, it's already tied together by valves, but there's 300-foot difference in elevation between our reservoir and Chimney Rock's reservoir. And so there would have to be some type of booster pump or something put in to make it happen. But I just don't want to see us standing here one night in a situation where that one well has went down and we're struggling to get water to everybody. So we're trying to be proactive with this and figure out a solution for it before we have that problem.
Engineers have to create the plan and seal it, and they're part of the permitting process before we can open valves, but we've got to make some changes
That's exactly right.
to make it function.
It all has to be approved by the state and everything before it can be done. It's not just as simple as going out and open valves.
Just one thought, are we looking at sizing the pumps large enough to push it? Also, would it be strong enough to push up to the village? Lake Lure Village Resort at some time, if they ever decide to tie into the city system, or we may want to do that sometime?
Has it been part of the scope of work?
No, not for this. I mean, we actually mentioned that at one time, and that gets into a lot of other stuff, and there was a big difference in the quote to get into that. But I do think it's something that could be looked into.
So if nothing else, have a flange for additional pumps or for tapping.
Right.
We
that
can
while we-
mention that, David, as
Yeah,
we,
it's not a problem. And
'Cause I
I'll
just-
mention it to
I
them.
just think later on as the community grows,
Yeah.
they would want to tap for city water.
Extended on that.
Right. I just, food for thought.
Quick question on the geotubes. How often do we have to replace them?
The engineer that engineered those things, I don't know. Initially, we will probably be changing several of them out because what I understand from the plant operator, that sedimentation basin down there is basically full. And whether we get rid of the sludge now or we get rid of it later, we're gonna have to get rid of it because if that plant goes away, it's gonna have to be removed.
But in the concept of the geotube, it goes in there and it all dries out and it fills before we have to move it?
Yes.
So again, about how long will it take to fill one of those up? I understand right now it may be more frequently,
Right.
but what is the normal expected time of
What
moving one?
Keith Webb, the engineer, told me we're spending $150,000-$60,000 a year in pumping those pump trucks. He estimated spending $40,000 a year by going this route. So you could save $120,000 a year
So
basically.
25% of the
Oh.
cost would be about 25% of what we're spending now.
So we really don't know how long it'll
The
take.
timing.
Yeah, and that just depends on the operator. I mean, naturally, the operator wants it out of the plant because
Right.
it makes the plant run better and it passes all its tests and stuff like that. But I don't have a specific answer if that tube will last 30 days or 90 days or 6 months. It just depends on how quickly the town is willing to remove it.
Well, but once we remove it, we don't get it back. We don't empty it and get it back,
No.
right?
No,
We have to
they're
buy, we have to
they're
replace it
disposable
with a new
tubes.
tube.
Yes.
So, and that's a continuing cost that,
It is, and those,
yeah.
but those tubes are like $3,000,
okay,
you know, and they hold a lot. They're 10 foot or 12 foot in diameter and 50 foot long. And when they leave out of there, you're probably looking at 60, 80, maybe even 90% solids, to where in the pump trucks, they're hauling 2% solid,
right.
98% water, you know. So it will be a big savings and it's working toward the place we're gonna have to be anyway when that plant's gone. So,
anything else, David, you'd like to add from your?
I like that thought for another week off.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming back in and hopping in the saddle right away. Next on our list is part of contracts. I signed the part of contract to receive the $223,000 from the state that we applied for the campground property. So when we started that project, our goal was to make sure that we keep all the rec money, make sure that we keep all the dredging funds, and try to combine those two projects over there on that site. And so we have now full approval from part of Chimney Rock Village and Rutherford County. We had to get floodplain approval. So all that was done. We received the permit Friday, so in good conscience, I could sign that contract. That's been sent to the state. They reviewed it, and just today we received an email back that said they have reviewed everything. They're fine with it. They're gonna sign it, send it to us, and then we should expect a check. I think one of the things I learned, I was telling Dean maybe we shouldn't say this, but I learned from the state that now we have been so thorough in our work that they feel like we've cleared some hurdles to actually apply for a part of grant for construction. So they were pretty impressed with all the work that staff has done to date on that plan, and they feel like that it would be a real easy application to apply for construction funds to actually do the work. So we learned that yesterday. But we weren't going to announce that, but
Why not?
I guess we did.
That's great news.
Yeah, it is. So we're excited about that. Dam update. The assessment is complete, and so our next steps will be to work with Schnabel to scope out the options, the design, but more importantly, to meet with Dam Safety Office as quick as we can so that they can look at Schnabel's report and help guide us on any recommendations relative to the options relative to renovations. So meeting with Dam Safety and then scoping out the next task order, which will be choosing the right alternative and then moving into design for that alternative will be what we'll be doing next. I don't know that we've announced it yet, but we've gotten word from USDA that they will fund a loan. It's not a grant, but 75%, so we can get a loan from USDA, low-interest loan for 75% of the cost of the dam. They felt like that we need to make a decision on what route we're gonna go with and have the application in and done by end of September. Otherwise, there's a chance that 75% may be reduced down to maybe 60, 55 or 60%. So we've gotta get moving on that. Yes, sir.
They have, electronic signs up at the dam they put up yesterday.
Yes.
The dam inspection's gonna be the 15th and 16th.
Correct.
Is that the regular annual, inspection, or is that something as a result of our meeting with Schnabel and us expressing our desires as far as a bridge? Do you have an
I think
idea?
it's the bridge inspection, isn't it?
It says bridge inspection.
Yeah, and I think that's all they're gonna inspect. The DOT is gonna inspect the bridge.
Is that their,
structure.
I guess that's their annual.
Just the bridge.
They say they're inspecting it 15th to 16th.
They
They
are.
don't say whether the bridge is gonna be closed or anything. I started to stop and say, well, that's good news, but what does it mean?
For large emergency vehicles, they will move their inspection vehicle. They have to have a large inspection vehicle on the dam itself with cameras that actually go underneath.
So they're gonna close it.
And so.
So it will be closed, I'm assuming.
Yes.
During probably an 8-hour period or something.
That's right, for those 2 days. But Dustin, have you spoken with them yet, Dustin, about traffic?
It's for the, bridge inspection, it's an annual thing that they do, but it's from 9 AM till 3 PM, those days.
Be closed those
Yeah.
2 days.
To, local traffic, it'll be closed.
Because they didn't put that on the sign, they just put they were closed.
And what's your plan, Dustin, for emergencies? You've already come up with a plan.
Yeah, we usually, would like to stage a apparatus on the other side of the dam, so that way in case there's an emergency on Buffalo Shoals, we can send some staff over, run the apparatus to where they need to while the bridge crew is moving for the additional apparatus to come through. if they need.
Response time.
So we appreciated that forethought on that too. Sewer, the engineering report's been submitted to the state. Next steps will be to meet with Brown and also DEQ. So we'd like to meet with DEQ to get their take on the report, to hear it from them directly before we scope the next task order, which would be the design. Brown basically has communicated they're ready to go on design. May and I were speaking before this meeting, and we'd like to make sure that we've had a chance to meet with the state to talk about that, see what any issues are.
Will that be a workshop, council workshop with them or what?
For design,
Brown.
For Brown, with the next step and meeting with DEQ.
we could set that up if that's what council would like to do.
You wanna do it?
Well, I'd like to know what, the details and stuff like that, because we're certainly gonna get asked,
Sure,
so,
we can set that up. We've got a meeting with Brown on Thursday. And
is
we can
that,
have
our
a-
meeting with DEQ then also?
No,
I thought I understood you to say there's gonna be a meeting with DEQ. That's where I was talking about.
so what I said was one of the next steps would be to meet with DEQ
Okay.
to go over the ER report to see if they have any issues with it before we move into design.
Okay.
But if a workshop is something the board wants, I think that would be fine, to go over the report with DEQ and Brown and the UAB and have everyone in the same room and
Do
go
you
over the
think that's a
report.
good idea or not necessary?
I think it's whatever board
I think
wants
it's a good idea.
to do.
I do.
I think it puts
I know how
everything on the table.
beneficial the meeting with Snobble was for knowing what's really happening, so.
Okay, let's plan for that.
Yeah, we'll involve the UAB in that. They're in a leadership role in that.
Okay, we can do that.
9 o'clock Wednesday would be good, just like before.
Whatever.
All right, we'll make that happen.
Midweek,
then, huh?
yeah.
Make that
Whenever
happen.
you'll get us some dates, right? You'll get us some dates.
But if a 9 o'clock Wednesday is a good day, we'll find a date on a Wednesday. That's good.
Mhm.
I think it's a good time. Okay, let's work on that. A couple of other things. Lake Lure Tours completed a wheelchair-friendly sidewalk, so it's made basically the beach handicap accessible and connected from the town's walkway, the pavers, all the way through the beach, through the pavilion, out to the peninsula. So we did a cost share on the peninsula sidewalk, and then Lake Lure Tours funded the remainder to connect that sidewalk back to. So certainly a good thing for us to have, and we certainly appreciate that. I think that's all I have on my report, Mr. Mayor, unless there's any questions. Oh, I'd say one last thing. We met with Geological Survey today. Brad and Dustin had Rick Wooten come. He was part of the group that presented some information about the landslide to the community. And so we met with Mr. Wooten today to talk some more about the landslide. So we're going to have a map in the Office of Community Development. And so if a person were to come in and want to pull a permit for improvements on a lot in the area that's on this map, then one of the first things we will do is direct them to go have a conversation with Geological Survey and understand the results and what they're dealing with before they move forward with any type of construction in that area. So, unless there's any question, that's all I have.
Questions? No?
I'll just make one quick comment, since I brought up the workshop to the audience. The workshop that we had with the engineering snobble was incredible information. And I just encourage you, and you encourage other members of the community, when we have one of these, it's open to the public, as all our meetings are. So I encourage you and others that you might make aware of it, because there's the information that comes out of those, you can't report it and it be the same. Look at the Daily Courier the day after the meeting, or you just can't do it justice as much as if you're sitting there. So just remember, those meetings are all open to the public. We had a good crowd, but we could fill this room up without a problem.
Yeah, it was. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on into the item 5, which are council liaison reports. Bob, you want to start? And we'll move down this way?
Sure, we had our utilities board meeting this month, and the first discussion was talking about some repairs on the existing sewer system. And the bright note that was found out, David and his staff have figured out that when the floodgates are opened, it's filling into a void in the sewer system, and our flows were elevated tremendously. So we feel like, and they feel like, that's where a lot of our larger numbers have been coming from, is that inflow on the downside of the dam, dumping from the floodgate into these openings. So they're developing a repair for that, and that should help a lot of that infiltration. So I think that was a major accomplishment there, and good job. Our town manager met with DWQ and Black Mountain regarding some of the fines we've been receiving for overflows. So we even hope that this will help with that, because once we go over our permit, then we're being penalized. And we feel like part of this problem, or a major part of this problem, was that open manhole on the load side. So the board also worked on how to package the loans for the project. One thing we have to look at is the new sewer plant will probably qualify for a 30-year loan, but however, maybe the pumps would only qualify for a 20-year loan. So the finance side has to be looked at, what will qualify for the longest term, and then what's got to go into the next part, so it'll be a shorter duration of payback. Also probably a difference in interest rates. So the board is discussing that and working with town staff to figure out what's going to be the best way to go on that. They're also have created a list of questions for some of the communities that have these pump stations and sewer systems in place, and they've been in for a long time. So what they're going to do is each of the members, or several of the members, are going to make a couple calls themselves to other towns and communities and say, with so-and-so's pump, what do you have, and what were your pluses, and what were your minuses, and kind of tabulate all that and rate them, and hopefully this'll help us in determining who we put on the bid list for bidding our pumps, to have the best quality pumps available. So the utilities board's working very hard for you to cipher through all of these decisions. That's all I've got.
Good. Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Bob on that report? That's a good report. John, would you like to go next?
Lake Advisory met a week ago yesterday. A lot of discussion on things. As we've mentioned before, we're doing a study for through this vacation season on boat usage and boat hours. The model that we have been using, we think's probably got some inaccuracies in it, and so and I just say that because we're looking for 5 to 7 vacation rental homes that have a vacation rental boat with those homes, that have an hour meter or would be willing to have an hour meter put on their boat, so we can have solid data on the amount of time that boat's being used as a vacation rental boat. We're looking at, and we have a committee that's working on that project, which Dean is in charge of, and we're looking to a possibility of separating vacation rental boats out to a separate category and a lot of different things. I say that because if you have a vacation rental with a boat, or if you have a neighbor that does, we're looking for volunteers that would be willing to, starting right away, to keep up with your hour meter to say, it had 200 hours now, and when at the end of the season it's going to have 400 hours. We're just looking to get that information. So if you have someone that might be interested in participating, helping us out with that, we would appreciate it. We want to get, actual facts. I'll pass on that one. Pass on that one. Everyone knows that Mr. Garrett Murphy's moved to Parks and Rec, and what's that the new one? Mitchell has moved into with Command Sergeant Major Brad, and we also talking about permits, working on that, and we had a citizen there that's got a silt issue in front of their boathouse, and we had some discussion about that. We're going to try to figure out how many places we have that where a private citizen has an issue for that. We have some of our contractors are looking at some new equipment that could be used in those situations, smaller equipment other than like we have out in the back, kind of a portable thing, tow in. We're finding out that with this smaller piece of equipment, that material could be put back on shore and repurposed right on the property adjacent to where it is. So got a lot of positive things happening with that too. And I think that's, Dean, unless there's something you can think of, I think that pretty much covers the 3 hours that we had that meeting the other day. I'll just go ahead and do ABC. Mm-hmm. ABC met last Tuesday in March, and had everything's going along smooth there. Employees continue to be an issue finding folks. One thing I will say, if I read 2 newspapers every day. I read the Asheville paper, I read the Daily Courier. It's a good friend of mine that used to work for the Daily Courier for years as the head of advertising. He called it the Daily Wipe. I don't know where that came from. And there's another guy that I used to know back when my dad was alive. He loved this guy named Brother Dave Garner. Brother Dave Garner was a former Baptist minister. And Brother Dave was not a fan of newspapers either. And Brother Dave used to say that newspapers were good for the bottom of the birdcage. Well, after I read the article the other day from after our Schnabel meeting, I couldn't agree with them more. But if you read the newspapers, there's a big push on to privatize ABC, alcoholic beverage control. Big push. Bills have been introduced into the General Assembly for that, and there's different levels that they're looking at doing. So North Carolina is one of the last 17 states that have this particular system, and the only state that has particular parts of this state-controlled ABC board. I'm sure William's familiar with some of that probably. So there's a lot of things being looked at, could be changes. Our ABC system in North Carolina now, we have an ABC board that's appointed by this council, and they kind of oversee the day-to-day operations. And they're looking to change that and privatize that. So, as we're looking for a new place for a building and all those things, that could become a moot point. So that's something we'll have to. I had an article that was in the Asheville paper 2 days ago that I meant to make everybody a copy of, and I forgot it. But I'll get it to, maybe Laura can get it out and post it on that. So that's all I have.
I get some kind of a publication that comes out of the state government as a mayor. And in it was an article that was talking about a bill that was being filed that would collapse all ABC's boards into county level board. In other words,
One per county.
One per county, and that they wouldn't necessarily be closing, they said ABC stores or anything, but they would just have one board who would make then the decisions on all these facilities in the county. So I don't know where that's going, but that's another thing.
A lot
I'll
of
mention
changes
too,
there.
that, yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with our wineries and our breweries and our distillers and the controls that are on them that are not that way in other states as far as being able to distribute there on the premises. So there's a lot of push for changes to that.
Keep an eye on that. Okay, any other questions for John? Okay, John, would you like to
Mine's
do yours?
very simple. The zoning and planning board did not meet
I know.
this month, but we do plan to meet, this coming month, next week, a week from today, 9:30. Right? You have an agenda for us.
Yes, sir.
Good.
All right, very good. Stephen?
Thank you. The Board of Adjustment and Lake Structure Appeals Board did meet for a very brief time to hold their annual elections for the chair and vice chair. Mark Hook was reelected as the chair for both boards, and Melvin Owensby was reelected as the vice chair for both boards. The Parks and Recreation Board met on April the 4th, and you heard Shannon and Dean allude to, and John, about Dean's new job title, no longer Lake Operations, as everyone knew it. It's now Parks, Recreation, and Lake Department, and he's the director. And Garrett Murphy, who used to be in Community Development, is now the Parks and Recreation Coordinator. Those are the two key folks on staff to deal with Parks and Recreation issues. The board discussed the applications for filling the vacant alternate position. That's on our agenda for later, so I'll save the comments for that until then. The comments by the mayor about the Ring in the Spring, the only other thing I wanted to highlight was the parking for the Ring in the Spring will be across Memorial Highway at the Riverside Center. There won't be any parking at the Flowering Bridge for that event. It'll be across the street there at the Riverside Center. The golf club, of course, Dale Minnick has been extended for another 3 years, or will be as part of this consent agenda. Last month we talked 5, but due to legal reasons, we can only go 3 right now. And his March numbers were the best for any March. This year was 362 rounds of golf versus last March of 268. But considering all the rain, that's pretty doggone good for rounds of golf. He also had 48 rounds of foot golf, or 48 foot golf games. Wanted to make sure that you look through town and look how, notice how well the parks look and neat with the flowers and so on, be sure to thank Melody Potter and Carl Landrum. Thank you. They've been doing a super job. The Boys Camp Road property, of course, you heard Shannon talk about the Partif grant. We're also talking about a name for that campground area, and the board's gonna be discussing it. If you have any recommendations or suggestions, please submit them to Jim Walters, the chair of the board, or Mo Bay if you see her, or Dean, or Garrett, anything that'll get to the Parks and Recreation Board for their next meeting, which will be the first Thursday of the month in May. And they're gonna be discussing that to provide a recommendation to the town, or to the council. The town does have a naming policy for all recreation and park assets, and the town council has to approve those names. Want to say thank you, big thank you to Mo Bay for hosting a Boys Camp Road cleanup. She had a lot of folks out there to help pick up trash and litter on the side of the road. Not long after, the county came through picking up on Highway 64. They also had a hike, I guess, up to Lago Vista and picked up trash going up that way. So thank you, Mo. A lot of big effort on your part. And I think Bill got to drive and do something and help out, didn't you? Huh? And John, oh, thank you, yeah. If you've never heard of the program called Geese Peace, it's now in effect again for this year. That's where they go around with a couple of folks and oil the eggs in the nest so the geese won't hatch, so we keep our goose population reduced. They already went out here a few days back and they found 5 nests with a total of approximately 30 eggs. So that is the most humane way to keep that population down. There's been renewed discussions about a Lake Lure Dog Park. The board has, it was on the agenda the month before last and again this past month, and they're keeping it on there to keep talking about possible site options for a Lake Lure Dog Park. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for Commissioner Weber? If not, thank you. All right, then. I guess we're ready to move on to the public comment section of our agenda. And Shannon, could you grab that and see if there's anybody on there?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. Ah, look who it is. Mo Bay.
Mo Bay.
Come on up, Mo, and tell us what you know here.
Thank you. I actually came here to make suggestions to the town manager and the council in regards to moving modular and manufactured homes around our town. So Shannon we had a brief discussion, and he said that he is already moving in that direction. Currently, there's nothing on the books. Can you not hear me?
So everybody else back there can
okay.
hear you.
Sorry. So since I got all worked up about this, I'm going to say my piece, if that's all right. Okay.
Go on.
And I have copies for everybody, too. Okay, I do have the following suggestions. Prior written notification to all residents to be impacted by the road closure, especially when there is only one road in and one road out of a residential area. Roadside signage to be erected at the entrance to the main road at least 5 days prior to the day of moving any sections of the building and showing approximate closure times. I know that can't be exact. We do have an alert system, so I'm suggesting using that alert system, either email notification, Nixle, a code red type of notification, You mentioned electronic signs at the dam before. Let's use those so that the residents and the business owners can get to their businesses or their appointments or whatever. Prior permission to cut roadside trees and shrubs. Subsequent cleaning up of all debris within a reasonable time of the moving day. The town should not have to pay their staff to clean up debris. Consider a road impact fee. Monies can be held until the roadway and the right-of-way has been inspected for any damage. Currently, there is still debris on Boys Camp Road, and there are huge ruts on both sides of the roadway. Now, the ruts will fill in, I know that, but it was a very poor job of cleanup. And I know David got on him about it twice, but whatever. Power lines and support lines that cross over the roadway should be protected and repaired if necessary within a reasonable amount of time. There are still wires, now you probably know what these are, Baba. It's not the actual power wires, it's the wires that wrap those wires. Do you know what I'm speaking of?
Sure.
Okay, so those are hanging down on Boys Camp Road. Now, a car's not gonna snag them, but maybe a tall truck would. So they're still hanging down, and I'm not positive that they happened as a result of moving those modular pieces. It was pointed out that it could have happened during the last storm, but they're still there, they're hanging there. And consideration for emergencies, especially, again, when there's one road in and one road out and over 250 residences. And also, again, for business owners. People have to get out of their homes and out of the road to their businesses. So, that's it.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mo. I think those are good recommendations. Yeah, if you could drop them off, and then we'll make sure that
The
We
wheels
plug that
already
in.
turning on this, right?
Yeah.
It's loaded into the project tracker for Brad. And
Okay.
so Brad's already working on ordinance, modify the ordinance so we can incorporate some of these things.
Okay.
So do I understand that the entire road was closed, both lanes, not just one,
Yeah,
but
they
both
have-
lanes?
Well, they have to, it's so long
Yeah.
till,
Well,
when they start up the road, they don't have a choice.
Wide, yeah.
I wonder, well, does this operation have to occur during daylight hours or during normal hours?
It's much easier for them.
Yeah?
Plus,
Involves a crane, those things.
They have to,
when
so will they
come in,
place it
they're-
when
they're
they
placed with a
drop it
crane.
off? Okay.
they had like 4 or 5 sections, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, they had to do it, I think, 4 different times, there were 4 sections,
4 or 5.
4
yeah.
different times that day.
And so while they go up there, the road's blocked, then it's open for a little while, and then it's blocked again for the
And
next
I
road.
think the first notice I saw on it was the afternoon before. That's the
And there-
first one I saw, I'm not saying that's the first one put out, but that's the first one I saw.
And there shouldn't be any cost to the town as far as cleanup and stuff.
Right.
But just to speak to that, being someone that's considering one of those, the homeowner, the person pays for that. That's part of the price of the package, and they pay for that, so there should be no cost to the town, and the people that are doing it should do the right job with it, and that's something that could be, with the companies that do it, need to be held accountable for making that happen.
I think Mo's recommendations are correct. Those are really what you need, and it's just proper planning. And, and hopefully it'd be sometime in the middle of the week, not on Friday afternoon or
Right.
something like that. But,
I even
Proper
wonder.
consideration for the people that
Right.
live here.
right.
Yeah.
And I just want to add that this is in regards to what happened just this past week on Boys Camp Road. And I sat at Firefly Cove with at least 20 other residents and cars and waited for 45 minutes because they underestimated the width of the piece they were moving. That should never have happened.
They do, though. I saw one being moved off 64, just a trailer, and they go off a steep cliff, and the rail of the trailer sitting on 64. And these guys do that every day. It's just, but no, planning's the answer to it, and what's your recommendation? I'll solve it.
Yeah.
It's a necessary evil. You gotta do it. It's just proper planning.
Okay, well, good topic, thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that did not sign up that would like to have their say, or? All right, there being none, then we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. And here we had 5 items, and actually 6 items, and we've swapped out a couple of items here. We've moved public records request policy, which is item A under new business, and item B, request for waive the peddling ordinance and allow food trucks for the July 3rd, 2019 fireworks event under the consent agenda, and we've removed and placed under new business what was item D, the budget amendment 243 deals with the hydro repairs, and also budget amendment 244, which deals with the hydro gate heist. We pulled those and put those under new business.
And then we put the golf course lease.
And the added, the golf course lease under the consent order, and we added an additional item, which is a waiver of the peddler's ordinance for the
You mentioned that, fireworks.
fireworks, okay.
So I make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, so that moves us then into unfinished business. We have none. And then on to new business, and we have, we start off with the Parks and Recs Board Alternative Member Appointment. Shannon, we have a procedure here. We have several nominees, right?
Well, have some comments on that from the Parks and Rec, if I could.
Sure.
The board discussed and reviewed all 4 applications, and out of the 7 members, 5 were present, and they voted unanimously to recommend Daniel Bragdon out of the 4 candidates.
Okay.
And this is for the alternate position to fill the remaining term of, for Jessica Huff.
If the
That's
board,
the last thing in your book.
the board chose to accept that recommendation, they
So
certainly.
we don't have to go through the whole secret ballot voting procedure, right? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we accept that recommendation.
I'll second that.
Second. All right, any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that then brings us to the budget amendment 243, which is a proposal from Clifton Corporation for hydro repairs. This is the first of the 2 items we moved here under new business. And so let's go over there. It looks like on page 46.
46, I'm sorry.
It starts and then goes on a couple pages with a detailed breakdown of the work that would be involved.
Right.
And,
So before, we've asked Mr. Merrick Clifton to come and answer any detailed questions you may have. But before he speaks, what I would like to just say is to kind of echo what I said earlier. This has to do with the portion of the generator that's above the floor that generates electricity. And this is the cash part of the generator. So this is the piece that we want to make sure is done and done right. And while we had the generator torn down, last month we talked about the bearing that, the lower bearing, and while we were in there, we wanted to check the shaft and also check the other bearings and sensors to make sure those are in good shape. And if they weren't, then we may need to repair those and secure a proposal for those while we have it torn down. To replace one bearing, not replace the other 2, and it means we may have to tear back into the generator soon if we don't do that work now. So we are waiting before we can put the generator back together. Certainly we have to reassemble, but one of the things we have to do, this is tied in with this, is to replace the hoist on the gate, because what we need to do is to be able to shut the flow off and then have someone go into the lower side of the small generator to make sure that everything is put back the way it needs to there. So these 2 items we have on your agenda are related to each other. So I just want to make that point.
all right.
So I know Commissioner Cameron is ready to go. So,
Well,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, so the total estimated cost for these repairs in Mr. Merrick's proposal was $174,000. And as you mentioned, it included a couple, item or two that may or may not need to be done. That was $30,000 for the, if the new seal system is not installed, right?
Right.
So there is some play in that, but because of the magnitude of the number, then we had asked for a breakdown of the particular tasks involved in all the repair, and he was good enough to give us that breakdown. And then I asked then for that breakdown, what were the costs? How did that cost break down? And he's provided that. Now, I have a copy of that. You have a copy of that to Bob, but the other commissioners don't necessarily have a copy of that. But we can probably share and look on. I'm not sure, with the exception possibly of Commissioner Cameron, if any of us are really feel comfortable commenting on, other than the magnitude of the number, whether it's a good number or a bad number. But we do have this breakdown, so I guess with that background, I will defer to Commissioner Cameron and his hearsay.
There's this, from Mr. Merrick.
Yeah. So do we want to hear from Mr. Merrick in terms of a little bit of background on this? And I think before you may have reported, why is this necessary? And he said it's a good idea to do this when the turbine is under repair, but not wait until it breaks and melts down or something. Just give us a little bit of that, and then you can maybe go through what you've got in here and why it's important to do that, and how I assume it will prevent the risk of this generator blowing up on us in the near future, right? So.
Well, there's two units in the powerhouse. There's a small unit and a large unit. The one we're referring to is the small unit, unit number 1. It's a vertical generator. I don't know if you've been in the powerhouse, but
Yeah.
so you're familiar with it. That unit, it was the original unit. It was rewound, it melted down, burned up in, I think it was 93 or 94. And it was sent out to Cleveland Electric in Atlanta. They rewound it and we installed it, and it's been running since then, so 25 years roughly. The shaft basically deteriorated in the turbine, and so the whole thing had to come out. And as long as you have it out, now's the time to make some repairs after 25, 30 years. We took out the lower bearing, and the lower bearing is bad, which leads me to believe there's probably problems with the 2 upper bearings. There's 3 bearings in the generator, a top thrust bearing that holds the whole turbine assembly, that holds the whole weight as it's turning. There's a radial bearing that keeps it going from side to side, and in the bottom of the generator is another radial bearing that keeps it going from side to side. The bottom one we have apart, and we know there's problems with it. It's been overheating some, and we don't know what the problem with that is. There has been, for about 5 years, an oiling problem with that unit. We don't know what the problem is, but if we get it apart, we can get the top apart, we'll be able to find and solve that problem. That's pretty much what it is. I recommend that it be taken, the rotor taken out of this thing and the windings cleaned. It's once every 25 years. Now's the time to do it if you're gonna do it. The reason it failed years ago was probably had to do with 2 things. There's an oiling problem in the top sump. If all you have is a 1/4 of an inch play in that thing. If you put in 1/4 inch too low, it stars it from oil. If you put in too much, it works when it's working, but when you shut it down, it instantly overspeeds and it slings oil all over that generator.
And that's one of the reasons probably that it caught fire back, 25, 30 years ago, is all that oil, you just can't keep it off. Every time, every night, it stops, and you're running it as a peaking plant. When you shut it down, it speeds it up for just a moment, 5 seconds or so, and it slings oil everywhere. And so it's been that way since it was installed. So it's been a problem like that. So now's the time really to go ahead and separate that rotor from the stator. The stator is the outside piece, the rotor is the inside piece. And just take them out and get access to it. And so I have a list here. If you want to, I can run through that real quick, or if you have specific questions, or however you want me to handle that.
Well, let's just go ahead and take them, starting with number 1.
Okay.
All right, removing the top bearings and repair all 3, and you're talking about remachining the top runner.
Right.
What's the cost of one of these bearings?
Oh, of a brand new one?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know, you wouldn't do it for less than 50 to 80,000, maybe more than that.
For one bearing?
Well, for the 3 of them.
So you using used bearings or new bearings?
Oh,
or what?
they're a metal shell is what they are. They're steel, and then the lining of them is Babbitt, which used to be tin and lead. They don't use lead anymore. It's just tin. So what they do is the machine shop will put them back, they'll clean it all up, put it back together. When they clean it up, they typically will take the old Babbitt off, and they get it hot to about 800 degrees, 900. That melts the tin off it, then clean it up, and then put it back together. And then they go ahead and put a new lining into that steel shell with a new virgin Babbitt.
So
And then they can machine it to the exact size of the shaft.
So you're reusing the shell that we have and just refilling it, basically?
Right. Now, there's 2 radial bearings that are done like that. There's a thrust bearing, and that thrust bearing is a pie-shaped piece about that big. It sits there and it rides up on top, just below this steel cap. It's just like a hat is what it is. This one probably weighs around 800 pounds, and it's very smooth. I mean, it's just as smooth as you can imagine. And what the lubrication for these bearings are a thin layer of hydraulic oil between those 2. And that keeps it, going. If you don't have enough cooling for the system, it'll get hot. And sometimes in that powerhouse, it'll get to be 120 degrees in there. When you have 2 units running, and if you don't have enough fans going, it gets blistering hot in there. And that way the oil will get up to be 160, 170, and that's what starts causing problems.
Okay. All right, you've got remove the rotor to get access to the rotor and stator windings. I'm familiar with that. I'm just wondering, why is that $4,000 just to pull it out?
Well, it's a lot of work to pull it out.
But we've got an overhead crane and everything else we've bought to make
Well,
that job quite easier.
You have. The first thing you have to do is there's a great big nut on the top of that thing. It's 12 inches diameter.
Right.
It takes a half a day or a day to get that thing off. It takes quite a while. It's a lot of work to do that. We have a beam that's about 15 feet long, an I-beam, that's what it is. Small I-beam that you bolt onto that thing, and that way you can turn it.
Right.
And in this case, we're gonna have to lock down the bottom part of the rotor, because the flywheel is not assembled. Usually we'll just lock down the flywheel, and that does it. But this case, we gotta lock the rotor down, and it's a bunch of work to get that done. And then once you get that done, the bearings come out real easily.
Right.
There's no problem there. It's just getting the thing apart.
Then you've got clean the windings, $8,000.
It's a real big issue.
Okay, well, you can't do a lot to the windings because of the old insulation.
Well, it's, the insulation on it is relatively modern. It's in the 60 or 1990s. I think it's actually a Class H insulation, I believe it is. So it's in pretty good shape. Two of them are even better than that. A few years ago, we had to take out two of the pole pieces that were damaged. So we took those out and took them to Hickory and got them rewound. But to clean the thing, you use what we call CRC brake cleaner.
Familiar with it?
And it's god-awfulest stuff to deal with, you can imagine. And so one of the things I recommended that you folks get is an air tank supply, so that the people that are doing that are not breathing any of that stuff. It's pretty awful stuff.
I mean, how long a task do you think that is?
It'll take a couple weeks to get that whole thing cleaned up. The stuff that gets on there is a carbon oil mixture. And that carbon is just, once it gets in there and it hardens, and then there's lint around and it all mixes in there, and it'll pack in there, and it's really difficult to get it out. So.
Okay, hydraulic pumping system, what's going on with?
Well, there's a problem there, that it's all a semi-intermittent problem. We just don't know what it is. It may be something that doesn't take but a half an hour to fix or figure out what it is, or it may be some other thing, we just don't know.
You've got 6,000 in there just to.
Yeah, we just don't know what it's gonna take.
That's a question mark on that one.
Yeah, we are replacing the oil pump. It looks like to be the original oil pump, 80 years or 90 years in running, and so we're gonna replace that with a new oil pump. We'll use the existing gear, I believe. The existing gear, interestingly enough, only rides half of the gear, so we'll flip it and it'll have basically a new surface on it. I recommend that be replaced. The big unit, the oil pump went out on that maybe 10 years ago, something like that, when William was still the operator. And when it blew, it put this fine dust particles all through that system. And it took forever to clean that stuff out of there. And it did a lot of damage.
Okay, back to the windings, are you gonna measure those windings, or?
We'll measure them, but we won't high pot them.
No, I was just gonna say you can't high pot them because you'll blow them out.
That's right. So, I mean, lots of people virtually insist on high potting. That's disaster.
No,
So we just go ahead and we're not gonna separate out each of the windings, because that's a real job to unhook those windings on the rotors. But we'll go ahead and do it, all three phases on the outside, and then on the inside also.
Face to face, face to ground.
Yeah, and I don't think there'll be any problem at all. It's in pretty good shape. It's not like the big unit. The big unit is as marginal as it can be and still work.
Right.
So.
Okay, you're looking at reassemble the rotor and the stator, which is basically slide one inside the other.
Yeah.
That's still $6,000.
Well, that includes putting that in. I believe that's also part of installing the bearings too.
Well, the bearings, now that's on another page. You've got to assemble the bearings, existing temperature relays,
Okay, so
sensors,
that's
another 10. So that's $16,000 to put a rotor inside and seal it.
It is a lot of work. I will tell you, I don't think that you won't exceed this amount. But, it wouldn't be surprised if some of them go over and some of them are a little under.
Well, I'm just being honest, the biggest thing I see is if we say $175,000, it comes out $174,300 is what we get in this town. And a lot of this work goes a lot quicker than was stated. I've worked in industrial all my life and done paper machines and heavy equipment and such, and it's just, some of these numbers just bother me because they're overprotective, I feel like.
That's probably.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's probably fair. When I did this, I did not want this thing to occur, and all of a sudden you have $250,000 sitting there, is knocking at your door, and you don't know where the money's coming from or something, so.
As far, the bearings are the main important part, and your temperature sensing and your oiling are about the three most critical things on
Yes,
this.
there's gonna be new oil sensing into each of the 6 thrust bearings and in both of the radial bearings. We'll have new sensors installed from there, rewired into the control panels, and with new meters. If you remember with the existing meters on the big unit, there's the temperature sensors, and they rotate between each one, and it'll be, I'm gonna go ahead and use the exact same ones that are there, so there's nothing different on one.
Okay, but you're reusing the same relays.
Pardon me?
You're going to reuse the same relays?
I think we can reuse one, but I do want to replace, I think there's one that's real old. And I think we want to be able to replace that, but that's, I think, $400 or $500.
I just want to make sure of that, and also what about calibration on all your instrumentation on there? Is everything going to be calibrated and up to date on that?
Yeah, that's not much of a job to calibrate the temperature relays.
All right, you've got to assemble the flywheel, you've got to place the generator in position.
What we have to do is we have to move them. John, when he took it apart, that thing, it has to be within less than a degree of difference between one and the other. Otherwise, you have wear on the rotor bearing, or the bearings, the radial ones, and you'll destroy them before too long. So it's very, very sensitive. These things are what's called Kingsbury bearings, and they're very, very sensitive if you have them out of alignment. So it takes a lot of work to do that. And you gotta get them, shim them up, and make sure they're very precisely done.
Okay, so 9 and 10, you say assemble the generator, flywheel, and turbine shaft, and then you've got to place the generator in position. So one's different from the other, you're getting it positioned, and then you broke out to assemble the generator?
Well, it's once you gotta get the frame in position, then you go ahead and move the rest of everything in place and get it all bolted up, and he's gotta put the flywheel in place, get the bolts up through them. Those old bolts are machine fits. It's just all the little things, it takes a lot of time to get them to fit right.
Okay, number 12, you got to install the cooling pump and ancillary equipment.
The reason for that is that doesn't exist now. And what happened to the old one is it must have ran dry, and then all of a sudden got a hit of water, and it just shattered the lining of the shaft itself. So what I'm suggesting here is to go ahead and put a brand new cooling pump. Well, it's not a cooling pump, but it's just a flow from the penstock. We're gonna flow from the penstock, pump it into there. The pressure on the scroll case is right at 50 PSI. And so I want to get 70 to 80 PSI flowing into the bearing itself. And so I want to make sure that's done. And then that will have a relay temperature sensor so that it'll go to the control panels. And if it does get in a situation where it's choked out of water because there's so much crap in the water that clogs it up, that way it'll shut it down and notify the operator.
We couldn't use a city water or cleaner water to cool that?
Well, there's no city water in the powerhouse.
There's not?
The only place there's well water, I believe, at the operations center up on, Williams' old house. I don't know exactly where that's city water or if it's.
That's a well.
That's a well.
Closest city water's going up the hill to Highway 9.
Okay, so that's why we just take it off the penstock, and I have to just make sure it gets cleaned out once a week or something like that.
And we filter it before it goes in there?
Yeah.
Okay, but that's 11,000 for that, and then a new turbine seal, $25,000.
Well, the existing seal, it's a piece of cast steel around the turbine, and it's got a reset to it. And what they do is they put in 3/4-inch square packing. It's kind of like a square piece of cotton. And they put it three or four rows in there, and then they press down on it, and that holds the water from blowing all over the place. And at the same time, but it does keep oil or water on it. And so that's always been a problem. As your bearing wears out, then you gotta keep doing that all the time.
Adjusting your packing.
Right, adjusting the packing. This will resolve all those issues. But it is very expensive. I will tell you that it's not a cheap thing for these packing because these are so large.
But $25,000 is a lot of money for.
Oh, it is. It's just astonishing how much, and it's not that fancy of a thing.
Well, that's why I'm thinking in my mind, I'm asking why 3 or 4 packs of packing are gonna be that kind of money.
Well, it's not that's not the packing that this is a brand new one that is, I should have brought some pictures of it, but it's a brand new packing. You don't have to repack it at all. You put it in, and there is, once every few years, you might change out this polyester lining to it, but that's about it.
Okay, assemble the 3-phase wires, exciter and system controls, relays and controls, sensors. Where are we spending our $9,000 there?
Well, it's mostly time, there's not much of anything to do. New supplies, new wires, there's a little bit of that, but you know,
I
just.
was gonna say, it's just 5 kV wires, so you pencil it and
Yeah,
take the end.
we don't even need to replace any of that, we just gotta rehook it up and re-insulate it. There's a lot of control wires going back and forth, for those things, and it just takes a while to do it.
Shouldn't take $9,000 a while to do it.
Well, you know, we'll see, but I'm telling you that I don't want this to happen with what's happened to the rest of the project, that it's just got out of hand on you.
Well, that's what's bothering me now, is because last fall, I was told that as soon as we got this turbine in place, we're looking at a month to 6 weeks, we'd be up and running.
Well, I don't
And
know.
now we're here almost a year later, and we're looking at now another 4 to 5 months.
Well, I don't think it'll take you,
8,
3 months.
that's what's in the
something like that.
report.
I don't know what happened to the cost, I wasn't involved in.
No, I'm not,
all
I'm
of
just
that,
saying,
so.
that's why I'm going through these line items, but I just feel we're a little heavy on these costs. All right, governor rehabilitation, high-efficiency motor.
The governors have a regular, I think it's 5 or 10 horsepower, 3-phase motor. The one that's in there is probably the original one. It sure looks like it's the original one. So it's very inefficient. I bet you're not getting 60, 70% efficiency off that thing. That particular unit runs it runs 24 hours a day, all year long, even when the generator's not running. That motor sits there and runs. Unless they're gonna know it's gonna be shut off for a little while or a week, they'll kill power to it. But if when they do that, it has to run for a couple hours to pump the oil back up. And for this thing, we just switch out a motor, and basically we'll put a real high efficiency motor on it, and that thing will pay for itself in a year by increasing the efficiency because it runs so much.
Okay, well, you've got the Just Wicket Gates, which that's standard procedure, but that's still $12,000 for
Yeah,
that.
that can be real simple, and you can do that in one day, or it can take on bigger units, it can take you a month. It's an iterative process to get all those things, and you've got, just a few thousandths, you've got to get them all adjusted, and it takes a long time to do. And I don't know how many hours I planned on this. I think it was 2 weeks, but I'm guessing with some good luck, it'll be less than a week.
All right, and then you're gonna test the system for another $11,000.
Yeah, I think that's a week and a half time to get all that done.
Yeah, sir, the question I had is, reading on the last page where you have the schedule, you said that we anticipate the work to be completed in 18 to 21 weeks, but you cannot do step 16 to 17. They're dependent upon access to the scroll case, which in turn is dependent upon the installation of the replacement intake tower hoist, which hoist in the head gate, which is the next item. And you can't do the scroll case until the cylinder gate, which is the head gate, can be completely lowered. Now, so I guess you could go all the way through item 14 as right now, basically.
Yes.
And then the rest just sits until that hoist and head gate are repaired.
Right.
Is that a correct assessment? Yes. Okay. And so depending on how long it would take us to get that repaired would depend upon how long it'd take you to complete your task.
Right.
Is what I'm reading. Okay.
I don't know what the schedule is for that new hoist, so.
Well, we've just now told we had to have this done for this other part. This is all relatively new to us.
Oh, okay. The reason for that is just, it's a confined space on the scroll case. And the only thing, if there's water, if that gate is not closed, you only have a butterfly valve that really leaks like a sieve when the other unit's operating. And it's really just plain safe. It would violate all sorts of OSHA regulations for someone to go down in there. And it's pretty dangerous, especially if you got any electrical cords or anything like that. You get yourself fried pretty easily. So that really is a requirement. I don't know, I believe that if we shut that down, then we can go back in and solve this adjusting problem without any OSHA people or any divers or any, fire department people there to be on guard or anything like that. I think we can just go in and do it.
All right, well, I appreciate the review on that. I want to ask you, for the public, we've got to keep these costs under control. This is $174,000 that I honestly feel should be done around 100, 125. I did an estimate on it, and that's about where I came out. And I ask you to do that for us, because we're spending money between that and engineering, just one place or another. Like I said, last year, we weren't even told about this. So we were told the head was going to go back one, go set the gen set on top of it and crank it up. That's the last word I had during the walkthrough I had with David 9 or 10 months ago. So while we go from that to this, I have a hard time understanding. I appreciate it. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I would say this, that it's at the board's pleasure whether or not we execute what's been submitted to you. We have Mr. Merritt before us telling you what's there, what needs to be done, and I would simply, ask the board to give it consideration. If it's something the board doesn't want to do or is choosing not to do, we could put the thing back together and set it right back in place. But it would function. How long? I don't know, but it's really the board's decision, Bob.
What does a new one of these cost, Mr. Mayor?
A new generator?
Yes, sir.
Probably $500,000, something in that range, maybe a little more.
About 1.5 in this one.
If we do these repairs, basically rehabilitating this unit,
Yes.
what's your, just guesstimate on how long this generator will function without another major overhaul like this?
I think it'd do at least 25 years, maybe 30, 40.
Okay.
So
Now, that doesn't include the turbine, but just the generator itself.
Yeah, you're talking about the generator.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Turbine's another situation altogether.
And this is the small turbine generator set, and it's rated at what,
1,200
kilowatts.
kilowatts.
So right now, we're running the large generator pretty much continuously,
Right, that's
which is
2,400.
2,400. And we're generating and receiving income, power income from Duke at the rate of, we're hovering around $100,000 a month. I mean, a couple of months it's been 109, 108, and now a couple of months it's been in the 90s. So what I'm trying to get my mind around, okay, so if that big generator, when it's running full out, will generate that kind of power, is this generator capable of generating half as much power and therefore half as much income? Or give me some idea, calibration.
It's capable of generating half as much power, but revenues is an altogether different situation.
Okay.
The marginal increase from the big unit and including the small unit is maybe 50,000 or, well, no, be 100, see, it's your total about 150 to 200,000. But if you're gonna have the little unit or the big unit worked on and shut down, then it'd make a world of difference, you know, $500,000 or more. In terms of future revenues, there's a couple things. One is you've had a very wet winter.
Right.
And so you have that, plus you have summer coming up. So I would expect your revenues to drop off at least 50% in the next few months, 2 months, 3 months. Most likely it'll drop off, and come August, September, October, those are the driest months. You may not even make 30,000 a month during those months. It's gonna drop off just significantly. So, and then you also have a power contract that expires in 3 years. It's to August of 2002. And the rate that you get at that point in time may be less than the rate you've got now.
It'll be tough negotiating.
Well, here's the problem. You're dealing with Duke Power, and you're dealing with North Carolina Utilities Commission. You know, I shouldn't say it publicly, but the reality of it is Duke controls the Utility Commission. What Duke wants, Duke gets, except for they'll step up and the commission will step up and do a few things for public publicity reasons and make Duke look bad, and then everybody thinks they're doing their job. Duke has a theoretical basis for their rates that's just preposterous. But the Utilities Commission bought into this foolishness, and they have for 30 years now. And, you know, at some point in the next 2.5 years, maybe sooner, you know, you folks need to study that in substantial detail so that you understand why Duke is how they're doing it. One of the things is the contract that was negotiated, the current contract, whether you operate it as a peaking plant or not, makes almost no difference to the revenues. It's a preposterous situation, but Duke set this scheme up so that people like Duke Power or Duke Lake Lure could not get more revenues than they thought they ought to be getting. So it's rate structures and all of that is very complex, and it'll come to you pretty soon, and need to be aware that it's really complicated, and it helps to be in a position where you have some leverage politically. It's very difficult for any town to do, almost impossible. Duke is the golden haired boys, and they can do no wrong except on rare occasions when they fill up Dan River with fly ash. But they're a difficult bunch to deal with. Almost impossible to negotiate with them.
I need to jump in here with something else. We're obviously going to repair the head gate and hoist. We have to. because without it, we can't generate power. If that gate is closed or the hoist fails and it closes, we can't generate power, correct?
Well,
We generate.
if it fails on the way up,
Yeah.
as long as you got it partially up, you can continue operating,
But if it's down, we can't.
you're done.
Well,
Well, I
and we
won't
have,
say you're done, there is a way to get them up. but-
and we have to lower it to close it off so you can get access to the
Right.
scroll case.
Yes.
So that has to be done. At that point in time, we're no longer making money and we're spending money to get the work done. Do you have to wait for the hoist to be repaired in order to do the scroll case work? Or can you do it while that gate is closed and the hoist is being replaced?
That can be done.
Okay.
In fact, if you want to take the chance that you can go ahead and lower that gate with what you have now, but there's no assurance it's gonna come back up.
Right.
But if you want to, you can take the risk of thinking you're gonna lower that gate and it's gonna work. That motor up there, is in pretty poor shape.
Understood.
And, you listen to it and it does a lot of grinding. And when you go to lower it, or when you go to raise it, about every 20 seconds, it trips a circuit breaker. But you can, it has worked up to this point. The risk is that you get it down, you try and raise it, it won't raise, and then what do? I mean, it's not a simple thing to get.
Yeah, I get all that. What I'm looking at is a simultaneous occurrence of actions. If your kind of work on the generator can be accomplished while that's being done also, it saves the town money in the long run, because we would then get at a point sooner to begin operation again.
Yeah, I don't, depending on how the people that supply that hoist, how they do that, it makes a world of difference to your revenues. If they go ahead and do it while the gate's open, and then they get a crane out or helicopters or whatever they're gonna do to go ahead and get that hoist off of there and, reconfigure the top part of it, set it back in place, while you're operating, you ought to be able to do that while you're operating.
Right.
And so the time that it's got to be shut down is pretty limited. There's only a few days that you have to actually stop operating while they're re-rigging that new hoist.
How long would somebody have to be in the cage to be adjusting the?
Well, if everything went really well, 2 or 3 days. If everything really went well. On the other hand, it might take up to 2 weeks. I don't think it could take more than that. And I've talked to John about the adjustments, all the new stainless steel, wicket gate assemblies, all of that is moving real freely. But the adjustments, it's kind of like a whack-a-mole deal. It's what the thing is. Every time you make one adjustment, you have to go back in and make 11 more to satisfy that. And it's just an iterative process that once you make it, then you can go ahead and make the other 11 and then figure out what your next move is. And it can be very time consuming, very frustrating.
What does that gate weigh off that hoist?
I think it weighs, I figure about 8 to 10 ton, I think.
That's the cylinder.
Yeah, that's a cylinder.
Oh, you can take care of that, Bob. You can lift that.
No, I'm just wondering, I'm thinking of bridging it, or, when you take the cable loose, leaving it open and have it supported.
There are chocks that you can block that thing up with.
Right.
And that keeps it open, so it's not have tension on it all the time.
So it doesn't have to be closed for them to repair the hoist, but
No.
it does have to be closed for you to do your
Yes,
work.
yes.
Yes,
And you're talking, that could take up to 2 weeks of closed time.
Yeah, that would be the worst-case
Okay,
situation.
okay, that's what I'm looking for, thanks.
Yeah.
So at this point, I want to ask David, if you'll come to the podium. David, I'll ask you a question. I just want you to hear from Public Works Director on this issue. I want you to hear what I've been hearing. So David, how comfortable do you feel sending someone down into the scroll case to do this work with the?
Very uncomfortable. I
And-
will not have any part of sending somebody in that scroll case without that drum being closed. I've seen the one valve that's in there, I've seen how much water comes through it. I've seen the condition of the pin stock. I would not go in it, and I would not ask anybody else to go in without that thing being dewatered and knowing that whoever goes in there can come out. Charlie made a statement earlier, that I want to clear up while I'm here, that we may be able to go in without the fire department and all of that. That's not gonna happen. When somebody goes in there, I'm gonna ask the fire department to be there, our representative from North Carolina League Municipalities, safety lady, to be there. We're gonna make sure that whoever goes in that pin stop comes out of that pin stop, and it's gonna be done in the correct way, or it won't be done.
Are there companies to hire that are expert in doing this that would make more sense than subjecting our people? Are you suggesting our people are gonna go in and do that?
No, the contractor, and him and John Wilson, I think are more than capable, but you have to monitor the air while they're there. You know, you have to be able to get them out if something happens, so that's where.
So is there a professional company that does that? That could be contracted to come in and do that?
Yeah, there are. I don't know, I have a name for you right now. Boyd.
Is that something to consider and get bids on? And I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in this by any means. I don't even know enough to make a drip, but, you know, I'm just thinking, I hear all this and, but we talk about subjecting our people that have never done this. Would it make more sense to have a company come in that's a professional?
Let's clarify something. Our guys wouldn't be going in there.
No, they
It's,
would not.
there's,
Contractor.
let me finish.
Okay.
There's two vendors involved in this. It's Clifton with Charlie and John Wilson. Both of those are vendors, and they're not employees of ours. So our guys would not be going in this scroll case. We would not be subjecting them to anything new or dangerous more than what they do right now.
How many times has John Wilson done this
I do not know.
exercise?
This is the kind of stuff that he
Yeah,
does.
I don't know either, but I do know our
Do you
our
know?
job as a town is to make sure before somebody goes in there that it is safe.
That's right.
There is a
Above
confined
everything
space
else.
entry permit that has to be filled out, and there has to be an on-site guy that stays there the whole time that is responsible for that permit.
But,
And
that's,
Anytime you enter confined space, you have to have a confined space permit. We have a rule, there's 2 in, 2 out, so that's a minimum of 4 personnel. We have trained personnel to do confined space rescues and to be on confined space standby. But
on our current staff.
on our current staff. But you take that current staff out of play, then the rest of the town is not being covered, you know? And once that staff is dedicated to that process, I can't pull them off for anything else. Until that guy comes out of the hole. There has to be air monitoring, there has to be 2 in, 2 out rule, there has to be rigging in place, that's tail lines and everything else, so that I can get people in there and out. There is private contracting companies that's on standby as a confined space rescue team, and that would be part of the deal. In the worst case scenario, it takes 2 weeks to do that, you're gonna have a team on standby for a long time to get
Yeah,
that work.
I mean, my initial feeling is we find some companies that do that and get some bids, you know, from an outside contractor. I mean, I understand there are an outside contractor, but doing it with this outside contractor requires our personnel, town personnel to be involved. I think my personal feeling, just from what I'm hearing here, is that, you know, we hire professionals to come in and do this.
Well,
And
if
when-
we
and when we
hired a
say-
firm to do this, wouldn't you still have to have the emergency response people?
Well, that company
Or
may
would they
provide
go
their
with
own
it?
coverage.
Ah, so they would provide the,
But
certified
we
people.
would be responsible to make sure that they cover all their OSHA permits for next
Mhm.
time.
I'd say if they're in their, if they are in that business, they pretty much got all that, you know, figured out.
So let me see, maybe I'm misunderstanding. So we've got two different things here. We've got, if we were to award the contract to Charlie and his company, it would be Charlie and John Wilson, or whomever you want to go into that area and fix that. Our guys would be there to make sure that if an incident happened, they could extract whoever is in there. So we've got staff to do it, but John, what you're saying is we would hire a company to take the place of Dustin and his crew for the extraction. We wouldn't hire a company to do what Charlie and John or whomever they want to employ to do this work,
If they're comfortable doing it, that part, that's up to them.
right?
But I'm saying if there's a company that does it all and it doesn't matter to Charlie, you know, I don't, does this include doing that? This $175,000, does that include going in, doing all that stuff?
People.
With
police
you,
people.
Yes.
But it doesn't include all of the damn resources to.
well, so then I would be saying that we find a company that will do that part, so we don't tie up our emergency people, our fire department and all that, for a possible 2 weeks.
I guess I should get with you and figure out whether or not it is under OSHA regulations, actually, a confined space. There may be a way to put a, opening in the penstock at a certain location that would, by opening that up, it would no longer be a confined space.
We can look at that, but Amy was down there with me, and David said it meets every condition for the confined space for the.
I wouldn't even attempt to try to get around a rule like that, you know.
No.
Safety first.
We don't need the headlines on the
Safety
NBC
first,
News
yeah.
that, you know, 3 people were
So
tragically.
let me ask Dustin, because I remember this discussion back when we were talking about the budgets, actually. We have 4 fire departments in this area, in the gorge. And remember, my question is, to what degree they support each other for different things.
Mutual
Is
aid.
this
This is mutual aid.
or is this a case where if you had to take four of your guys who are qualified and serves, could we not get coverage
Yes.
during that period of time from these other fire departments?
Yes, I could probably put together enough to, cover our needs as far as the town, as far as emergency services. I'd have to check with my current staff to see who's qualified, since we've changed hands and had some change in staff.
So I just wanted to get beyond the point of saying, well, if you did this, then all of a sudden for 2 weeks, our town's not properly protected.
Right.
Because we could make it properly
Yeah,
protected
we could
by
take care of
drawing on the
medical, the fire,
adjoining
the-
fire departments to get coverage, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
not
we
really
draw
an
on
issue. It's yeah, okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
I'm just saying that once we dedicate our fire staff to being on standby for that crew, while that crew is in the hole making
Yeah.
repairs, that's all they're doing.
That's
They're
what they're
there
doing.
at the ready.
And I think the point I'm trying to make, that is what these guys do.
Mhm.
That is part of their job. And we have mutual aid agreements that they have to do things like this. They backfill with guys from these other departments. That's why we have mutual aid. Not only that, we're writing big checks for these other departments to help us in situations like this. We've already paid our money for this kind of thing, and that's what they do, and they can do that. We just need to make sure that when they leave their post, normal post, they get backfill from these other departments. Otherwise, why are we writing these big checks to these other departments to get their support to help us when we need it?
And that should be simple coordination in
Absolutely.
advance. Right.
That's right.
So I'm thinking about it strictly from a safety standpoint.
Oh, yes.
Not necessarily about coverage for the town, I'm thinking about the people down in that hole.
Me too. And that's why I invited David to the podium, because David's been adamant about what he just told you, and I'm not one to override this recommendation. That won't happen.
Our insurance has told us it is a confined space and nobody goes in there, period, without having a confined space permit and all set up and everything. And she actually said she would like to be here when that was happening, on standby from the North Carolina League of Municipalities.
I know Amy, I'd like to have her here too.
So, I mean, she's trying to help, she's not trying to hurt.
We know
No,
that.
I agree.
We know that.
So
That's not in dispute.
It's not hard. I mean, you're putting a safety lanyard on somebody, usually you'll have a setup for the pulley system if you need to pull them out, and you have an air monitor and a blower going, so.
Well,
I mean,
All right,
that's all
so-
the confined safety we can.
Even though the dollar amount is not what we'd like to see, and hopefully it can be reduced, I guess I need to make a recommendation or make a motion that we adopt budget amendment 243, transferring $175,000 into this account for that purpose.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
One more
Commissioner
question.
Kilby, yes?
Mr. Merrick, is there a possibility it could be less than 174,000?
Yes.
So these figures are, you're hoping worst-case estimate scenario, and it could be less.
Yes.
I'm saying it better be less.
When Mr. Merrick made this proposal, me and Shannon asked him for this information, and Shannon made it very clear that he did not want to have to come back to the board 2 months down the road or 3 months down the road and say, hey, we need another $30,000 or another $40,000. So we did ask him for a worst-case scenario when he done these pricing.
Okay.
And that's what I understand, that's why I'm stressing it should not be $174,000.
You don't want to see within $100 of what that was.
And by the way, I just got this tonight, and I just got the package on Friday. So that's how much time we've had to look at this. So that's the other thing, I get a little irritated that we get some of the stuff on Friday and we're supposed to make a decision on Tuesday.
Well, let's don't make it now.
No, we're
Mr.
going-
Cameron, if you're not comfortable with the data we have, then let's don't make
I
it.
don't-
Point
I don't
one.
know. My
Point number
one-
two, will this generator work if we put it back in the hole like it is? Will it run, Charlie?
Yeah. And then probably burn up. My point is, we need this information sooner to have more time than 3 days to make a decision on $175,000. That's my point.
I understand your point.
Stop
Mr.
right
Cameron.
there. I'm through.
Well, I'm not finished.
All right.
And so what I'd like to remind the board is, we've had a clerk who has been in and out because of a pregnancy. And she's out today, she's gonna be out for 90 days, and we're doing the best we can. So we're trying to get you the information you need.
This has been going on for 2 years, this project.
I haven't been here for 2 years.
Since you've been here, it's been going on. And it's just, I got misinformation last year, I'm getting tired of misinformation. It's not rocket science. If this problem was here last October, why weren't we made aware of it by Christmas?
Commissioner Cameron, I didn't give you that information last fall.
No, I'm not saying you did.
Okay.
I'm saying we were given the information by a walkthrough that I went through. And I was told, as soon as we get through, David was there and heard the same thing I did.
I'm probably as frustrated as you are about having to come back to this board and not get the things done down there at that dam. And so I want it to end too. And I made that very clear to Charlie and to David, and we got you the best information we can get you. I'm not saying the board has to do what's being recommended,
No, it needs to
but
be
you
done.
do have the information.
I've got the information, I feel it's got to be done. It was just, like I said, the misinformation and the short time to make a decision and research it. That's my point. I'm done.
All's clear.
Further discussion? All right, there being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Charlie and David. So now we move on to the hoist, right?
To the budget amendment 244. And while I was looking at that, and I asked Sam to come up, actually on that budget amendment in our packet, which is at page 50, the line under the box says 175,000. That number should be 320,000.
Okay. Oh, I see what, yeah, right.
Right. The
Yep.
line right under the box, the number there, 175, should be 320.
Okay.
So
So, when we make a motion to approve or disapprove this amendment, we need to do it as amended. The budget amendment as amended.
As amended.
Correct, Sam? Got it, thanks.
Okay. All right, so let's, what kind of discussion should we have on this one? We pulled it from the consent. We have, this is something that's been languishing around, right?
If back when we talked to Schnabel, if everyone recalls, I asked Schnabel to try and put the hoist gate and the penstock and the head gate and the hoist and the penstock all in a higher priority and look at the needs there. And of course, based on their recommendations, this is something we know we have to do. I know Commissioner Cameron provided other numbers before, maybe a month or so back on this one. We had an estimate that I guess for almost a year, we had an estimate that involved a helicopter removing it, like $300,000 or something. From the numbers that Commissioner Cameron provided, I think was around 150 or 175 or something.
125.
125 or something, but yet this number's still at 320, and there's no estimate in our packet
Right.
to which this is based upon. Is it still the same one that was floating around with the helicopter?
I'll lead on this one.
Okay.
I'll lead on this one. So what we're trying to do is get you some checks and balances and information so you can make an informed decision, feel good about the decision you made. So this number here, this 320,000 number has been bumped up by 20. I asked that it be bumped up by 20.
Okay.
The number that we loaded into the work plan for the hydro repair, and Schnabel was present, participated in that meeting. We had a workshop. Mayor was there. I was there. David, Charlie, Schnabel. $300,000 is what was loaded into that work plan. So how do we get the checks and balances, and how do we get the best value for our money? This money, if approved by council, would be dropped in this account, and then we would ask for proposals from at least 4 or 5 companies to do this work. We did get a proposal unsolicited by Clifton Power. I know what that number is. It wasn't considered. But we also looked at, we asked Schnabel to send us a list of companies that do this kind of work. So I believe this number will cover the proposals that we get back. Now, if you've got 4 or 5 people competing for the same job, they're competing against each other. They're not necessarily competing against whatever we put into the account. So as soon as this money goes into the account, then we're going to do the RFP process and get proposals to replace that hoist. So that's what you've got. It's a simple, if you would like to prove the number, then what we guarantee to you, we're gonna RFP this process. It's not gonna go to one company. It's gonna go to 4 or 5, and we're gonna ask for proposals. Okay?
So let me ask this, just for clarification. So what we just approved in terms of a budget amendment was moving money from one account, and I'm talking about the 174.
Yes.
We approved moving money from one account to another. What we didn't necessarily was approve an agreement with, by doing that, we didn't approve this proposal from Clifton and authorize the work.
That's right.
We haven't done that yet.
That's right.
All right, is that something, all right, so we haven't done that. So we're talking about doing the same thing now on this budget amendment, and we're not authorizing any expenditure until we see proposals, right? We're just moving money into a pot that we think is enough, right? Is it, what's the importance of this timing now, to do this now, as opposed to, do we have to do this, Sam, before we advertise for bids or proposals? Do we have to have money sitting in a budget in order to be? So
why?
Why, yeah.
So we're loading up these 2 accounts so we can get the work done. That's all we're doing.
But we're not authorizing any work to be done until we get proposals, right?
No, but I think I see the logic in that, and that's making sure we have the money available in order to get the bids in and to get it
We
done
don't
right.
spend it on
Yeah.
something else, or,
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
it could
I mean,
be,
really.
yeah.
Well, it's not
I
meant,
mean-
it's meant for us to have the discussion, but
okay,
it's meant to
thank you.
get the work done. You know,
Okay.
we've had work down there languish and languish and languish and languish. And when I took the position, I committed to getting things done, and that's what I want to do for this board. So this is a first step, seeing what kind of money we got to work with after we have this discussion, and then we'll RFP the replacement of that hoist. It has to be done.
Okay.
If we don't get the hoist done, well, we could put the generator back in the hole like it is,
Right,
get
no,
the hoist
I
done,
think-
we could fire things back up.
Yeah,
But I think you probably agree the work needs to be done on the generator, but we need to get the hoist replaced in order to activate the generator after that work is done.
It absolutely needs to be done. And I remember David talking to me probably within a month after he got hired about, and Bob Cameron about this, horse gate and motor. So it's a definite necessity, and the 320 is a large figure, but we're looking at not exceeding that and looking at working within that parameter.
And hopefully much less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we
Based on the
going, are
bids.
we going for sealed bids on this?
I think we
Yeah.
should.
I mean, I don't know what the requirement is.
We can have a sealed bid, we can have a
Yeah.
formal process no matter what the number is.
so that we have a clear, you know, so we don't have any misunderstandings later on. So what I'm hearing is, that before any contract is, even after sealed bids are received and before any contract is authorized, that would, recommendation would come from you
Yes.
to this board to
Right.
say, I've reviewed these bids and I recommend this and here's why.
Yeah.
And then we would say yes or no at that point. Would that be, what about,
For Charlie?
in
Well,
this,
what I-
do we need to do
what-
that for his work or
What
no?
I would do based on
Yeah.
Charlie's work, is that we ask Charlie to go back and sharpen his pencil. I think that's been made crystal clear. I made that clear to him, and I'd like to see him go back and sharpen his pencil and give us his best number. I think he's willing to do that.
And one of the things, Charlie, I don't think I may have mentioned this or asked this question of David. Normally, when I see project of that magnitude, and particularly when there's pieces of it which are, it's just impossible to, and how many times did you say that? You know, well, we have to get in there, we have to figure, it could take a day, and it could take 2.5 weeks. What I normally am used to seeing is a quote for what is your best estimate, best conservative estimate, with a contingency amount on top of that, where you know that's in your gray area. Say, well, I might be able to do it for this, but it may take more time on certain things, and I know some things could take less time, but a contingency factor, and that way you can try to manage to the first number, and if there's a reason why it took longer, you can come and explain why that was, and still operate within the overall budget number. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Can you produce a quote like that for us, or?
Yeah, well, I guess what I need to know is do you want a time and materials estimate, or do you want a contract with me or somebody to do the work?
No, it would be with the town if you have a contract.
Right, but I mean,
It would be a contract.
Another contract.
It would be a contract, a time and materials with a not-to-exceed number.
Yes.
And there would be a gap between what you give us in terms of your estimate on what you think it could be done for, and what the upper limit in which we would have to authorize you to work above that. Or you would stop work, basically. is what-
okay, well, I mean, that's fine. I'm flexible to do whatever you want.
Is it?
It's just that that's not what I've been doing for the last
I know.
year and a half. I mean, I just, whatever
I
time it
know,
takes to do
Charlie.
something, you know, I send an invoice for X number of hours
And we continue to pay it.
Yep. Well, I think and you know, to do job cost control, you know, that's why I asked for this to get broken down. You know, I'd like to see your, whatever contract we have with you, kind of broken, so that as the project goes along, and this is done in sequential order, we know that some things could cost a little bit less or a little bit more, but we'll have a basis for tracking this darn thing, and if it looks like it's getting out of hand, we can say, hold it, stop, what's going on here? How much more is this gonna, you know, we don't wait until the end of the job and we're out of money. Well, we're out of money, but we're not out of job, and then we have explaining as to why this is going so far over budget, right? So we do it early in the process and not at the tail end. So that's what I think. If we can get a system going like this on this project, we can use it as a model. And I think we've done that with some of these other task ordering agreements with Schnabel and others, where we can monitor incrementally what this is costing, you know, and not wait. All right?
You ready for a motion?
Can I do it? Yeah.
And then further discussion?
Yeah. Ready for a motion? Go ahead.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve budget amendment 244 as amended in the amount of $320,000.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Kilby. Okay, any further discussion on that? If none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay. Well now, and that,
That's
Make a
next
motion
one's
to
Bob Cameron
adjourn.
issue.
we have a motion for that?
Just
Adjourn?
made it.
Okay, there's a second? Surely there's a second. I think Commissioner Moore made that second.
That's all right.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.